Okay, this old truck has been a rich source of content for me lately. I got another little issue. Got in here yesterday morning, started it up, and it idled really bad. I got it on the highway, and it was cutting out, was stalling, and I just limped back here and hooked up my tester and show you what I found. Okay, as you can see there, I've got my check engine light on. See right there? Otherwise known as the MIL light, M-I-L, the malfunction indicator light. Service engine soon. Okay, so there's a code somewhere stored in the system. I'm going to use my little OBD2 tester here. You can pick one of these up for about $25 or $30 nowadays. Really good to have if you do your own work, if you want to troubleshoot what's wrong with your vehicle. Okay, I'll show you how to use it here. 1 second. Usually how these work is you turn the key to the on position without the engine running and then plug in the device, okay? So we're going to turn it to the on position without the engine running. Okay, so you just look underneath the dash. It's usually on the driver's side. Here it is right here on my vehicle. That's the OBD2 connector. Plug it in like that. And it'll read working. It's communicating with the vehicle. Okay. So just, you know, it takes a little bit of practice, but these are very easy to navigate. So basically all you want to do is you want to come down here, click enter, diagnostic menu. Okay, what we want to do is second one down, read code. So we're going to come down here, read the codes, press enter. It's going to work. Okay, the code I'm getting is a P0340, and it's code 1 of 1. So there's only one code stored in the computer, and it's saying that it's the camshaft position sensor A. It's a circuit bank 1 or single sensor. So why it says that is in this vehicle it's just got one camshaft, and so one camshaft position sensor. But for vehicles that have dual camshafts, like dual overhead camshafts, you know, it could be one sensor or the other, right? So that's why it differentiates there. Okay, so now that we know that, let's go take a look at where it is and see if we can get to it. Okay, I just happen to have another camshaft synchronizer here with the sensor on top of it. This is what was in this vehicle when I bought it. And what I did was I rebuilt the engine, and when I rebuilt the engine, I put a brand new camshaft synchronizer in with a new sensor. And that was about 7 years ago. And it seems like I'm getting a signal now that the sensor has failed. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the sensor. I'm going to put this sensor back on the engine and see, hopefully, if that'll fix my problem. Okay, now that's what we're looking for. Now let's go down and see where it is on the engine. Okay, on this Ford 4.2 engine, they put these camshaft synchronizers and the sensor in a really fun spot to get to. And it is, you can almost hardly see it from here. It's down under here. This is your exhaust gas recirculation valve. It's down under that. And it's, well, you basically, you can see here, you got to take a lot of stuff out to get to it. So let's get that opened up and get a look at that sensor. Okay, so one of the things I got to do is there's a pipe, this coolant pipe right here, this little coolant pipe right here, it sticks down into the water pump, and that is right over the top of the sensor. The sensor's just to the left of it there. So I got to take this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drain the coolant down to that level before we start this job. So what I've done here is I've got a catchment pan here, and this right here is the hose that comes from the valve on the bottom of the radiator. So I'm just going to open that. It's a 3/4 or 19 millimeter bolt on there, and it'll just drain down into this pan. Okay, it's starting to drain. Okay, so while I'm waiting for that to drain down a little bit, I'm just connecting a few things. I got my breather out of the way. I'm going to disconnect these wires here. This is from your throttle position sensor. Just take that out of the way. I got a vacuum line going on to the top of the EGR valve. I'm going to disconnect that. So I'm going to be moving that EGR valve out of the way. Okay, I'm just disconnecting the pipe from the EGR valve. Okay, that's got to get out of the way. And there's just a couple of little 10mm bolts holding that EGR valve in. Okay, with the EGR valve out of the way, there's a bolt holding this water pipe into the top of the water pump. That's got to come out, and you got to remove this clip on this hose on this side and take that hose off of here, and then this pipe will lift up enough out of the way to get at the camshaft synchronizer right here. Okay, so that cam synchronizer that's down there, the cam position sensor, is identical to this one. It's 5.5mm socket you need to get it out. So I'm just going to take this one off here to show you what we're going to try and do down inside the engine there. Okay, so that's what we're going to see down in there. Once we get the sensor off, we're going to just see the top of the synchronizer, and we're going to just replace the sensor. Okay. Okay, might be hard to see, but I've got the socket down there on the top of this cam sensor. It's a 5.5mm socket. So I'm just going to take those two little bolts out and we'll pull that sensor out of there. And so here's the old sensor. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, looks pretty gummed up inside. That's probably the reason for the failure. Look at that right there. Let's take that out on the bench and get a better look at it. Okay, initially I was just going to change the cam position sensor today when I went ahead with this job. But when I got the old one out, this is how it came out. Look at that stuff in there. See all that? See, this is the one that had originally been in the engine that I changed out for a new one when I rebuilt it, but you know, it's in perfect condition. Look at this one that came out today. This is the one that had caused the failure. And you see all this is oil and grease deposits that, and if I'll show you here in a second on the cam synchronizer. See how this one is nice and clean? Well, the one that's in the engine is filthy with oil and oil deposits, just like on the bottom of that sensor. So what's happening is there's a seal on the shaft coming up to the top here, and it's failed. And so I am going to change the synchronizer. I'm going to change the whole thing out. So what I've done is I've bought another camshaft synchronizer, so I'm going to change this. It comes with a new sensor, and it comes with an installation tool. I'll show you that in a second. So when you go to change a synchronizer, okay, on the old one, I'll show you down in here, before you take the synchronizer out of the engine. Okay, now since I've decided to change the cam synchronizer body out of the block, I had to do something first. I had to make sure that the installation tool fits down perfectly on top of the cam synchronizer before I take it out of the block. And what that means is everything's orientated correctly. It means that the position of that arc inside that actuates the sensor is in the right orientation in relation to the position of the pistons and the valves in the engine. Okay? So how you set that up is really simple. You just take a socket on the end of the crankshaft and you turn the engine over by hand until that arc comes into a position that you can install the tool. So the last thing you do before you take the bolt out is just take a pen and mark the center of this little opening on the cam synchronizer and get a reference point somewhere on the block, like over here where off the synchronizer, like that. Generally it wants to be aimed towards that. Okay, and we'll get I'm going to discuss that at length in a minute here, and the pros and cons of what the manufacturers say about that angle and what it really means. Okay, I got the hold down bolt taken out. It's a 10mm head on it. Got that out of the way. Okay, I'm just going to take a screwdriver and see if I can slip it underneath that cam synchronizer and pop that out of there. Okay, there's another thing you're going to discover when you go to change your camshaft synchronizer, and it's going to be in the form of instructions that come with the new camshaft synchronizer, or in the case of if you're using a manual to follow, very often repair manuals will indicate a number, which is a degree, an angle off of the center line of the engine that the camshaft synchronizer and the cam position sensor need to be aimed off the center line. In this case, they say 54 degrees, but they don't really explain why that is. And it's a really big pet peeve of mine because it leads to a lot of confusion that's unnecessary. And I'm just going to walk you through the steps of why they do this and what it means and how it's not related to the actual timing of the engine. Okay, you can see right here, this is a Haynes manual, and they show, changing out the camshaft synchronizer, and they explain things down in here. And again, what they're showing here is they're showing the degree that the camshaft position sensor and synchronizer should point when it's installed in the block. Its final position should be, they're saying here, 54 degrees off the center line of the engine. And all they say is with the cam synchronizer installed and fully seated in the timing cover, the arrow on the alignment tool should be pointed 54 degrees from the center line of the engine. And what makes this difficult to do is there's no reference points in the arc around here to find 54 degrees. You don't know if you're at 51 or 55 or 59. You're somewhere in that area. And quite frankly, that's all it has to be, is somewhere in that general area. And I'll tell you why. This has nothing to do with the static timing of the engine. And for illustration purposes, what we're going to do for a second is just go back to my other drawing. Okay, as we know, number one cylinder, top dead center on the compression stroke, puts the cam synchronizer in such a position that the arc inside of it allows the installation tool to sit on top of it, okay? So in our case, when we've lined up this arc inside the cam synchronizer, the alignment tool can be set on top of it, and the arrow is going to point out like this, okay? Now, at that point, we know the engine's at top dead center on the compression stroke on number one cylinder. The alignment tool's in the right spot, okay? And that because it's saying that this arc, which is the shaft basically that comes out, which is this shaft here that comes out and joins with the camshaft, is in the right orientation to this housing, okay? So basically this housing spins on itself, You can turn it any way you want until you bolt it down. Okay, so what happens is if you know that this arc is in the right relationship to the housing and the tool holds it there when you put the tool on there, and number one cylinder, top dead center on the compression stroke, your timing, that's your static timing, okay? Now, you got to understand that when this cam synchronizer comes down in here and meets up with the camshaft, it's a circular gear, okay? And I'll show you that right here. So here's the circular gear, okay? So if you've got the installation tool on there, in the only way that it's going to fit on there, you can put this cam synchronizer down in the block, theoretically, in any position. This could be going any direction. It doesn't have to be 54 degrees off the center line of the engine. It does to a degree, but it doesn't affect the timing. And just let me explain that. This could be set in here at 54 degrees if we knew exactly where 54 degrees was. This could be set in there, and yes, it'll start right up because everything's in time. But because this is a circle and none of this is moved in relation to each other, this could be in this way, it could be in that way, it could be in that way, it could be in this way, and it could be at 54 degrees. Okay? And the only reason that they're saying it needs to be at 54 degrees off the center line of the engine, in this case it's like that, okay? And I'll show you that on the engine in a moment, is simply because the connector, there's an electrical connector, has to plug in to the camshaft synchronizer, to the sensor, okay? And that's one reason. So you've got to be within an arc, a certain arc here for that plug to reach it. The other thing is you know, in this case, there's water pipes that stick out of the engine. There's a pipe here, and there might be a pipe here, and there might be a bit of a housing or something here. So when they engineer these engines, they you know, it's somewhere on a mechanical drawing, they've figured out it's 54 degrees off the center line that has to be aimed, you know, so it clears the pipes and the plug will reach it. That's the only thing it means. So you have no way of knowing if you're 54 degrees. You know that you can sit it in there. The plug's gonna reach it. It's gonna clear the pipe there. It's gonna clear the pipe there. So if you got that cam synchronizer lined up with the tool, you can stick it down anywhere it'll fit within a bigger arc than that. And you don't know where 54 is. There's no way to tell if you're at 54. But you know, kind of on an angle like that, you know, where it's not gonna bump into this plug, where the connector is going to be able to get to the sensor and plug into it. Okay, that's all that 54 means. And I've looked at this, you know, when I first started learning this stuff, I used to look at this 54 degrees or whatever whatever number they were giving you for a certain engine, and I was thinking, how am I going to figure that out? You know, there's no marks on the crankshaft like an old engine on these. You know, there's nothing. There's no radius gauge. There's nothing to figure out what 54 is. That's from the factory, from some engineering drawing. The engineers decided we're going to put 54, yeah, it's 54 degrees because they've had some way to figure out exactly where it's got to point. But that's just a range in between the pipes and whatever other things it may interfere with so that the connector could get to it and it's not going to interfere with anything. That's all it means. That's got zero to do with the static timing. Okay, and back to this. I don't know if that was confusing. I don't know. Hopefully it wasn't. If you've got the installation tool installed on top of the cam synchronizer and that arc is in this position, you know you're at number 1 cylinder top dead center on the compression stroke. You're either at the top dead center number 1 on the compression stroke or the exhaust, but you can't be at the exhaust position because this would be over here and the tool wouldn't fit on it. Okay, already explained that you've got 2 turns of the crank to 1 turn of the camshaft. So 1 turn of this is 1 complete power stroke of the engine. So it's the number 1 top dead center, it leaves there. Power stroke, exhaust, intake, and compression. 2 turns of the crank, 1 turn of the camshaft, 1 turn of the synchronizer. So you're only going to have this tool fit on one way, and when it is there, it's number 1 top dead center on the compression stroke. You can put that in. If you didn't have a pipe to worry about anywhere on that engine, you know, where this is going to interfere, where the connector is going to interfere, you could have this anywhere around 360. And it would work. It would work perfectly. Okay? And that's a confusing thing that they add endlessly to, even with the instructions that came with the new synchronizer, it had something like that. It's got it here in the Haynes manual. It doesn't tell you why. The only reason for this is to allow the connector to reach the sensor and plug into it without interference from pipes and whatnot that might be in the vicinity of the cam synchronizer. Okay, I hope that helps somebody. Okay, and now we're going to move back out to assembling the actual new camshaft synchronizer in the engine. Okay, I got the old synchronizer here that I just pulled out of the engine. Got the new one here. The oil pump drive shaft is just in the bottom of the old synchronizer like that. Just pull it out, move it over to the new one. In that goes. Okay, we're just going to take a little oil and we're going to lubricate the gear. I'm going to lubricate that O-ring at the bottom of it. Okay, just like that. All right, now, the only thing left to do is we're going to orientate this vane in the synchronizer in such a way that we can put the tool in. So, I'll get the tool. Okay, there, the tool is right down. Let's just see. See where that is? So the tool is right down there, so we know that these two are lined up together. Okay. Now, we're going to sit this in the engine. Okay, so we got the gear lubed up, and we got the O-ring lubed up. And we had a rag. In this case, I had a glove over the hole. I didn't want anything to go down in that hole when I had this out. So we're just going to pull out the glove. We're going to install this down in the engine. And now that we know the whole story on the angle story, how this is supposed to be aimed towards the front of the engine, as I just explained, we know that that is critical only to a degree, in that it's got to be orientated in such a way that you can get your connector to it, and the connector is not going to be blocked by any fixtures on the engine, any tubes or pipes or anything like that. Okay, the new synchronizer is down in place, and I've got the tool inserted on top of it, and it's aiming in the right direction, and I got the bolt started. So now I'm going to tighten the bolt down. Okay, that's nice and snug, and I installed it with the tool in place just to make sure that everything stayed lined up. And now once it's snug down, I can take the tool off and I can put it back on with ease. There's no strain on the plastic, and it goes right down, it seats right down home. So I know that it is completely in the right spot. It's lined up precisely. Okay, all right, now I'll take off the tool, and I'm going to put the cam position sensor on top of the synchronizer. We're getting there. Okay, here's the new cam position sensor, and as you remember, they have a 5.5 millimeter head on them. Okay, so I'm just going to put that down in there. There. I've just got to hook up the connector. Then I'm going to start putting everything back together, including this little pipe. I got the O-ring back in there. I'm going to stick that down inside the water pump, hook up these hoses, and we'll get this back together and we're going to try it out. Okay, I got it all back together. Just about to put the coolant back in the engine. See it down in there? Me either. It's buried. But it's all installed, looks good. Get the coolant in it, hook up the battery. We'll try this out. Just a minute.